My parents are telling everyone I'm a terrible daughter because I refuse to pressure my husband into rehiring my brother, who was fired for theft from a job I helped him secure. I, Sarah, a 34-year-old woman, was raised in a household where the mantra was always family above all. Everyone was implicitly expected to make sacrifices for one another. My parents have perpetually viewed my younger brother, Caleb, who is 29, as the golden child. Throughout our childhood, if Caleb found himself in trouble, I was designated as the one to fix it. When we were kids, he crashed my new bicycle. I was the one who got scolded for letting him ride it in the first place, and then my allowance was docked to contribute to the repair costs. He failed a subject in high school. I was tasked with tutoring him every single day, which often meant canceling my own commitments. You can see the pattern. I effectively became the designated cleanup crew for the messes Caleb left in his wake. I truly love my brother, but he is fundamentally irresponsible, exceptionally charming when he needs something, and completely unwilling to accept the consequences of his actions. In contrast, I dedicated myself to building a stable and responsible life. I went to college, secured a good career, and eventually married my husband, Dan, who is 36. Dan is a wonderful man, patient, honest, and incredibly hardworking. He started at his company over a decade ago and has diligently climbed the ladder to a management position. It's not a massive corporation, but it's a well-respected, mid-sized company in the technology hardware sector. Dan oversees a team responsible for inventory and logistics of high-value electronic components. He is extremely serious about his professional responsibilities and the integrity of his recommendations. Over the years, my parents have never hesitated to ask me for favors on Caleb's behalf, from money to cover his car repairs to giving him a place to stay. We even let him live in our spare room for a while last year after a messy breakup. The list goes on. Their justification is always the same. This is what family does for family. For the most part, I tried to accommodate their requests when I could. However, as I got older, I started establishing some gentle boundaries. I stopped lending him money after one too many loans vanished without a trace. My parents, for example, did not react well to this. That's when the guilt trips began, highlighting how financially comfortable I was while Caleb struggled, and how it was my duty to my family to share my success. To say it is draining is an understatement. This brings us to the latest incident. A few months ago, Caleb lost his job yet again. His employment record is spotty at best, filled with short-lived jobs in retail and warehouse work. My parents called me, launching a not-so-subtle campaign suggesting that Dan could surely find a position for Caleb at his company. They argued that Caleb just needed one person to believe in him, and that this was my chance to truly step up for our family by asking my husband for this significant favor. I was deeply reluctant. As anyone can guess, mixing family with professional life can end in disaster. But then Caleb started pleading with me too, swearing that he would finally get his act together if he just had a real, stable job opportunity. He promised he would be the model employee and make me proud. I have to admit, it worked on me. He seemed genuinely sincere and desperate. After weeks of their combined persuasion and seeing my brother practically begging, I caved. I approached Dan about it. Dan was understandably skeptical, but he agreed to help. He managed to get Caleb an entry-level role on his team, handling inventory records and assisting in the warehouse. It wasn't a glamorous job, but it offered a good salary and full benefits. It was the exact foot-in-the-door opportunity Caleb claimed he needed. Dan was very clear with both Caleb and me that recommending him was a professional risk. If Caleb messed up, it would reflect poorly on Dan's judgment and reputation. I assured my husband I understood, and I genuinely believed my brother would rise to the occasion, at least this one time. For the first month or so, everything seemed to be going smoothly. From what I gathered, Caleb was showing up on time and learning the procedures. My husband would give me brief, polite updates like, "Your brother is settling in okay." I allowed myself to feel a sense of relief, hoping that this gamble would finally pay off. Well, so much for that hope. Shortly after Caleb passed his 3-month probationary period, the entire situation imploded. Dan came home one evening and was unusually quiet. He sat me down and told me there had been an incident at work involving Caleb. My stomach immediately dropped. Dan proceeded to explain that several high-end graphics cards, each worth a significant amount of money, had disappeared from the secure inventory cage. These are specialized tech components their company distributes. It was a substantial loss. They reviewed the security footage and discovered my brother attempting to smuggle the components out in his backpack. Caleb had tried to steal valuable equipment from the warehouse and was caught on camera, plain as day. I was mortified. Dan explained that when management confronted him, Caleb's first move was to pretend he thought the items were being discarded as trash, which was an obviously pathetic lie. Who puts brand new, sealed electronics into their personal bag thinking they're garbage? He then dissolved into begging, claiming he was desperate for money and was going to sell them. It was a complete and utter disaster. The company, like any sensible business, has a strict zero-tolerance policy for theft. Dan said that human resources was immediately involved, and Caleb's employment was terminated on the spot. Dan told me that Caleb had been fired and escorted from the premises earlier that day. This is where an awful situation became even worse. That same evening, as I was still trying to process my own shock and anger, my phone started ringing nonstop with calls from my parents. I was barely coherent when I finally answered, which was a huge mistake. My parents were absolutely livid, not at Caleb, but at me. Apparently, Caleb had run straight to them after being fired, feeding them a story about being unfairly blamed for some missing items. They either fully believed his version or chose to pretend they did. The conversation quickly escalated into them demanding that I fix this. I tried to explain that Caleb was caught on video, that the evidence was undeniable, and that this was entirely his fault. They refused to listen. My father said something that I will never forget. "Your husband should have protected family. Who cares about a couple of stupid gadgets? Family is supposed to come first." I was stunned into silence for a moment. I argued back that Dan had helped by giving him the chance in the first place, and it was Caleb who threw it all away. My mom then started to cry, telling me I had to convince Dan to give Caleb his job back because he would fall into ruin again, and it would be partially my fault for not looking out for him. She genuinely suggested that I should have somehow prevented this, as if I am my brother's keeper. I told them in no uncertain terms that I would not ask Dan to jeopardize his career and reputation to rehire someone who had literally stolen from the company. I said that Caleb is a grown man and needs to deal with the consequences of his choices. Well, that statement caused an eruption. My mother sobbed louder, calling me harsh and heartless towards my own flesh and blood. My dad practically snarled that I was betraying my family for my husband and that I needed to remember where my loyalties should lie. It spiraled into a full-blown screaming match, with them accusing me of abandoning my brother. I ended up shouting back that Caleb did this to himself and that I was done covering for him. That's when my dad gave me an ultimatum. Either I convince Dan to make this right, get my brother reinstated, or find him another job within the company, or I shouldn't bother calling or visiting them ever again. He said, if you won't help your brother when he needs it most, then you're no daughter or sister to us. I was completely flabbergasted. In the heat of the moment, I yelled something like, if that's how you really feel, then fine, and I hung up the phone. That was several days ago. I haven't spoken to my parents or Caleb since. Once I had calmed down, I sent a text to my brother, telling him simply that I couldn't help him and asking what on earth he was thinking. He never replied to me, but he did post a vaguely dramatic status on social media about backstabbers and family who don't have your back, which I'm certain was aimed at me. Now I feel completely torn. My entire upbringing drilled into me that family is the most important thing. I hate that things have escalated to this point. A small part of me wonders if I should have tried harder to negotiate with Dan or his company, even though I know there's virtually zero chance they would rehire a proven thief. Another part of me is furious with my brother for his incredible stupidity, and with my parents for expecting me to wave a magic wand and fix it. My husband has been completely supportive. He insists that there is no way Caleb could or should get his job back, and that my parents are being completely unreasonable for putting this on me. I know he's right from a logical standpoint, but the guilt and self-doubt are eating me alive, especially since I facilitated this entire mess by getting him the job in the first place. Did I inadvertently set him up to fail? So, am I the bad guy for refusing to push my husband to rehire my brother after he was caught stealing? Edit. For clarification, a lot of people are asking why the company didn't press charges. Believe me, I was bracing for that outcome as well. The only reason Caleb is not currently facing criminal charges is because Dan advocated for him. Dan was furious with Caleb, but he convinced his bosses to simply terminate his employment and not involve the police. I believe he did it partly out of a sense of loyalty to me, and because he didn't want me to have to deal with the fallout of a family member being arrested. It was a final act of kindness. Despite knowing this, my parents still see Caleb as the victim in all this. The cognitive dissonance is staggering. Update 1. I want to thank everyone on Reddit for the flood of responses to my original post. I am genuinely overwhelmed by the attention it received and by how supportive and refreshingly blunt everyone has been. It has been a few days since I posted, and I've had some time to reflect. Reading through the comments was like a light bulb going on. So many of you pointed out how utterly absurd it is for my parents to expect me to cover for an actual crime, and that this enabling behavior has likely been a lifelong pattern. That hit me hard because it's absolutely true. This dynamic wasn't created overnight. I was awake late last night, and another memory surfaced from years ago. When Caleb was in his late teens, he was caught shoplifting at a local mall. Instead of letting him face the music, My parents smoothed the whole thing over with the store. They happened to know the owner, so no police were called and no charges were filed. I remember begging them to let Caleb face the legal consequences so he might actually learn something. Of course, they refused. He got a token punishment at home, grounded for a week, which was quickly forgotten. They even told extended family it was all just a misunderstanding. The only lesson Caleb learned from that was that Mom and Dad would always be there to bail him out. That was one of the first times I realized my parents would bend reality itself to shield him. Anyway, your comments gave me a lot to process. The consensus was overwhelmingly not what I expected, but it was exactly what I needed to hear from impartial observers. You all also helped me recognize how deeply my family's toxic dynamic has conditioned me for this role as the fixer. As many of you said, if you keep catching your brother every time he falls, he'll never learn to stand on his own 2 feet. I'm taking that to heart. To answer a few common questions, how did this impact Dan's job? Sadly, it did have repercussions. There was some professional blowback. I asked Dan if he got into trouble for recommending Caleb. He admitted that he had to have a very uncomfortable meeting with his superiors. He essentially had to apologize for vouching for someone who then committed theft and promised to be far more judicious with his referrals in the future. It was humiliating for him. I feel absolutely awful about it. He put his professional reputation on the line for my brother, at my request, and it came back to bite him. Dan, being the incredible person he is, doesn't blame me at all. He blames Caleb, but I still carry the guilt of having brought this drama into his life. Does your brother have a history of this kind of behavior? Besides the shoplifting incident I mentioned, I suspect so. He was fired from at least one other job before this. At the time, my parents' story was that his manager had a personal vendetta against him. But knowing what I know now, I wouldn't be surprised if Caleb's own actions led to that termination as well. My parents have a long history of downplaying or outright hiding his mistakes. It feels like they were training me to see him as blameless so I would always be willing to help. Have your parents always been this biased and enabling? Oh, absolutely. My parents have consistently enabled Caleb while placing the burden of responsibility on me. If he made a mess, I was expected to clean it up or provide cover. This pattern goes way back, and it seems nothing has changed now that we're adults. So, here is what I have done since my original post, largely thanks to your advice. Many commenters urged me to stand firm and set clear boundaries. Some even suggested considering limited or no contact if my parents persist. That idea is hard for me to swallow. As dysfunctional as our family is, the thought of completely losing my parents and brother is devastating. But I also know I can't keep living like this. I haven't made any official declarations of no contact or anything so drastic. I sent my parents a carefully worded email. It took me a full day to write because I wanted my tone to be firm but not aggressive. In the email, I reiterated that I love them and Caleb, but what they are asking me to do is wrong. I stated that I cannot and will not ask Dan to compromise his career by rehiring Caleb or finding him another position. I stressed that Caleb's choices have consequences, and this is his mess to own, not mine or Dan's. I also told them that if their only intention is to hurl insults or ultimatums at me, then I will not engage. I basically told them I am open to talking, but not if they continue to be abusive or have unrealistic expectations. I sent that email the day after my post went live. So far, there has been no reply. I know they've seen it. I got a read receipt, one of the perks of a detail-oriented workplace. Their silence is very loud. It feels like they are using the silent treatment as a punishment for my disobedience. It hurts, but I am preparing myself for it. I also made one more attempt to reach out to Caleb. I sent him a text saying something like, "I'm here if you want to talk about what happened or need advice, but I can't undo what you did." He didn't reply. Instead, he posted another cryptic message on social media about fake people and those who choose others over their own blood. He also posted a sad-looking selfie with the caption, "Betrayed by the ones closest to you." It's so melodramatic I would laugh if it didn't hurt so much. I'm interpreting their silence as a standoff. They're likely waiting for me to crack and come crawling back with an apology. The old me certainly would have by now, but after reading all of your perspectives, I know that holding my ground is the right thing to do. I haven't blocked anyone. I want to leave the lines of communication open for a respectful dialogue, but I refuse to chase after them. One last thing. Some of you strongly recommended therapy, both for me to unlearn these conditioned feelings of guilt and for Caleb, though he would never go unless forced. I took the first step and have started looking for a therapist for myself. I haven't found the right one yet, but I appreciate the push. So that's where things are, a tense stalemate. I'm standing firm, trying to take care of my own mental health and hoping that maybe time will bring my parents and brother around. I won't lie, a part of me is still hoping they'll reach out, ready to talk instead of demand. But I'm not holding my breath. I will update you if anything changes. For now, I'm just bracing myself for the long haul. Update 2. I wish I could report that the stalemate ended on a positive note, but alas, using the silent treatment as a weapon is a well-worn tactic in my family. I remember an incident in high school when I defied my parents over something minor. I refused to cancel my plans to tutor Caleb. They responded by giving me the cold shoulder for an entire week until I finally broke down and apologized. That was their method. Withdraw affection and approval until I towed the line. So their silence over the past few days was not surprising. I recognize the playbook, and with the support of my husband and all of you, I'm resolved not to fold this time. However, it seems my parents have more aggressive tactics in their arsenal than just ignoring me. A few days ago, Dan came home from work looking visibly stressed. He told me that my father had contacted his company. Yes, you read that right. My father sent an email to Dan's employer to essentially complain about Caleb's termination. In the email, my dad accused Dan of failing to protect his own family and portrayed Caleb as the victim of an unfair corporation. He even had the audacity to suggest that the company overreacted and that Caleb only took the items because he wasn't being paid a living wage. Can you believe that? It was a tidal wave of guilt-tripping. We're family. How could you let this happen? And minimization. It was just a few computer parts, nothing serious. I was absolutely mortified. Thankfully, Dan's boss is a rational person. The employer only called Dan to say, "Please ask your father-in-law not to contact us again." He wasn't mad at Dan, but more baffled and slightly amused that my father actually thought a sob story would override video evidence of theft. Dan apologized profusely to his boss and assured him it would never happen again. I cannot begin to describe how furious I was. Who does that? who tries to harass their son-in-law's workplace because they're upset that their other son finally faced a consequence. This crossed a major line. That night, I sent my parents another email. This one was much shorter and angrier than the last. I told them to never interfere with Dan's career again. I said that if they had any respect left for me, they would stop this insanity immediately. I warned them that if they ever pulled a stunt like that again, it would cause irreparable damage to our relationship. Honestly, it might already be beyond repair. I sent it, and then called my mother because I was too enraged to speak to my dad directly. My mom actually answered. She sounded weary and sad, as if I was the one forcing them to take these extreme measures. "We only went behind your back because you refused to help your own brother," she said. Then she asked, "What were we supposed to do? Just let him suffer?" The conversation went in circles. She insisted they had no choice because I wouldn't help. I kept telling her what they did was completely out of line. She kept bringing up Caleb's dire situation and how they, as his parents, are just doing whatever they can to help him. I pointed out that whatever they can always seems to involve sacrificing my or Dan's well-being. It was like talking to a brick wall. I will admit I lost my temper. I basically said that if they can't see how monumentally messed up this all is, then I don't know what else there is to say. And I hung up. We have been back to total silence since that call. No reply to my furious email. No follow-up calls, just nothing. The day after, I got a snarky text from my brother that just said, "Heard you yelled at Mom." Nice. I didn't respond. It's so infuriating. He's letting our parents fight his battles for him and then acting smug when I get upset. The lack of self-awareness is astounding. For now, my main priority is my own home. Dan has been nothing but supportive, and thankfully, his company considers the matter closed, chalking it up to a wayward family member. We've been having quiet evenings at home, and he keeps telling me I am doing the right thing. I must have asked him 20 times, "Am I really not in the wrong here?" And each time he just holds me and says, "No. You are doing what's right." I don't know what will happen next. Maybe my parents will continue to pretend I don't exist unless I surrender. Maybe there's another storm brewing. Honestly, at this point, I'm ready for anything. Update 3. I was expecting things to remain quiet, but instead, I experienced one final emotional roller coaster with my family. My mother has always employed a softer approach than my dad. She avoids direct confrontation, preferring to play the role of mediator or, more accurately, the guilt tripper. When I was younger, if I upset my dad, my mom would always come to me later and say things like, "You know your father loves you, he's just disappointed." She would then gently nudge me to apologize or comply for the sake of keeping the peace. She is the quiet enabler, the one who will say, "Please, just do this for us," making you feel a deeper sense of guilt than shouting ever could. A few days after my last update, my mom reached out to me directly for the first time since this whole mess began. She left a voicemail saying she wanted to talk and would come over by herself if I was okay with it. I had very mixed feelings. My mom came over the next evening. Dan stayed home for moral support but gave us our privacy by hanging out in the backyard, just within earshot. When I opened the door and saw my mom standing there, looking exhausted and with tears in her eyes, I almost caved. I gave her a hug, and we sat down in the living room. She started by saying she missed me and that she hated that we weren't speaking. I told her I missed her too, but she quickly transitioned into the same old plea. "This situation with your brother has gotten so out of hand," she said, "and your father has been beside himself with worry." She begged me to reconsider helping Caleb, not necessarily getting his old job back, but maybe I could ask Dan if he knew of any other openings, or I could use my own professional contacts. Essentially, if I won't get him back into Dan's company, can I find him something else? She framed it as a compromise. I just listened, trying to keep my composure. Then I gently but firmly told her, "Mom, I have tried to help Caleb so many times. I got him this job, and he threw it away through his own actions. He needs to face the consequences and find his own way this time." I also told her how deeply hurt I was that they had turned on me and Dan, especially after the stunt with his work email. My mom was crying for most of this conversation. She kept saying, "You don't understand how hard this is for us. He's our son. We can't just let him fail." I told her that I understood they love him, but that shielding him from every consequence was ultimately hurting everyone. I even used some of the advice I got from you all about how protecting someone from failure just guarantees they never learn. She didn't raise her voice or argue. She just sat there crying softly and said, "I'm so sorry it has come to this. I just wish you could find it in your heart to forgive him and help him." That statement just broke my heart. I started crying too. "I don't want our family to be torn apart either, Mom," I said, "but I can't be the one to fix this, not this time." For a brief moment, we just sat there holding hands, both of us crying. I thought maybe, just maybe, she finally understood. But then she whispered, barely audible, "Your father says he won't talk to you again until you make this right. I don't know what to do." And then she asked it. "Is Dan really not willing to give him another chance, just one more? Maybe in a different department?" That's when I knew she hadn't really heard me at all. Her only focus was still on me finding a magical solution for Caleb. I shook my head and said, "No, Mom, Dan can't and he won't. It's not about willingness. It's just not possible or fair. Caleb burned that bridge." I reminded her that Dan had already gone out on a limb to keep him out of legal trouble. If things had gone another way, Caleb could have a criminal record right now. She nodded, but I don't think it truly registered. My mom finally said softly, "Well, if you won't help at all, I don't know how I'm supposed to convince your father. He feels like you've turned your back on all of us." I was emotionally drained and choked up at this point. I just repeated myself. "I'm sorry he feels that way, but I have to protect my own family and myself, too. I can't do what he's asking." She looked at me for a long time, then said, "We love you. I hope you'll reconsider." I walked her to the door. We hugged again, both still crying. I told her I loved them, and that my door was always open if they wanted to talk, as long as the conversation wasn't about me fixing Caleb's life. She nodded without making any promises, and then she left. That was the last time I saw my mother in person. There has been no further contact since that visit. It feels uncomfortably unresolved. There was no breakthrough. They are still entrenched in their position, and I am standing firm in mine. My dad has made no attempt to contact me. He seems to be holding true to his word until I fix this. My mom is heartbroken but won't go against my dad or their mission to save Caleb. My brother hasn't reached out either. I assume he's just hiding behind them, waiting. After that visit, I was a wreck for about 3 days. Thank God for Dan, who was there to just hold me while I cried. It's one thing to stand your ground in an argument. It's another thing entirely to look your crying mother in the eye and still hold your ground. Final update. It has been a while since my last post. I wanted to let some time pass to see how things would eventually settle. It has now been several months, and I wish I had a happier resolution to share, but real life isn't a sitcom. The short version is that we are still estranged. My parents haven't contacted me, and I haven't contacted them in any significant way. We didn't even speak during the holidays and family birthdays that have passed, which was a first in my entire life. It was painful to miss those traditions. I won't lie. I spent one holiday evening having an ugly cry on my couch because I kept waiting for a call from my mom that never came. In the meantime, I've learned a few things about my family through the grapevine. According to a cousin, my parents did eventually manage to find another job for Caleb. Apparently, my dad called in a favor with an old friend and got Caleb an entry-level job at another company. So my brother is employed again. True to form, it seems that even without me, my parents will continue to use their connections to bail him out. I hope for his sake that he doesn't squander this chance too. But based on his history, I have my doubts. Regardless, it did lift one burden from my mind, the worry about my brother's long-term financial stability. He has a job. What he does with it is now completely on him. I've been focusing on my own well-being. I did find a therapist and have been seeing him regularly. It has been incredibly helpful to talk through everything, the guilt, the anger, and the grief of essentially losing my family, at least for now. My marriage, thankfully, is rock solid. If anything, this whole ordeal has brought Dan and me even closer. We've had many long talks about boundaries and what kind of family dynamic we want to create if we have children one day. Dan has been my anchor through all of this, constantly reminding me that I am not cruel or heartless, that I am allowed to have boundaries, and that my worth is not determined by my parents' approval. I honestly don't know how I would have survived these last few months without his unwavering support and the validation from so many of you here on Reddit. Do I still hope for a reconciliation? In a way, yes. They are my parents and my brother. I'll probably never completely give up hope that we can mend things. I would love to have a relationship with them that isn't built on a foundation of guilt and enablement, but I've come to accept that I cannot force that change. They would have to be willing to meet me halfway, and so far they have shown no sign of doing so. Accepting that has been hard, but it has also brought me a measure of peace. If they never come around, I will be sad, but I will be okay. My door is still open, should they ever decide they want to talk to me as a daughter and not as a resource to be used. In the meantime, I am moving forward with my own life. Finally, I want to say thank you again to everyone who took the time to comment and offer advice and moral support. I truly believe that without the perspective and encouragement I found here, I would have crumbled under the pressure and caved to my family's demands, just like I always had before.